Hello everyone and welcome to the Global Business Update with TA. As always, as the business world keeps buzzing, I bring to you 7 stories from around the world to keep you updated with the latest insight. USA is noticing that their level of sea rise is actually around 30 centimeters. This is putting some of the coastal cities like New York, Miami under tremendous threat, and as a visible evidence of this development, they are noticing that the amount of flooding that is taking place, the serious and high level of flooding that is taking place, has gone up to about 10 to 15 times for a year. Well, the businesses and the people of US need to start taking climate change much more seriously, isn't it? Strong nationalism drive has driven the likes of Nike and Adidas away from the top positions in China, and guess what? The local brands such as Li-Ning, and even Anta are some of the brands of China, especially in apparel and sportswear, and even specific products like sneakers, has really come up. Since the Xinjiang province cotton controversy, where some of the global brands decided to avoid using cotton from that region due to the mistreatment of the Uyghur Muslim minority there, most of the Chinese people have shifted away even on the online shopping malls like Tmall, for example. They have shifted away from the foreign brands and moved more towards some of the local apparel brands. It probably was that turning point that these brands are ready for, and some of the brands are now accounting together cumulatively to about 28 to 30% of the market share. And while in some months we have seen Nike coming back to the top, their position is seriously challenged and they are struggling to stay relevant, especially in a market where as the political rhetoric is going more towards nationalism, so are the consumers. The whole world is watching what's happening in the borders of Ukraine. Will Russia enter or not? But supply chain experts are bringing a different perspective to the matter, and their concern is, should there be a war between these nations involving the allied nations, US and some of the other superpowers as well? What would happen to the global supply chains? Cyber attacks on supply chains are most of the time a common occurrence, especially during times of war. Could be a proper war or even a cold war situation. Now, the last time similar tensions were there in 2017, there were attacks carried out on some of the top supply chains in the world, and it was traced back to some of the Russian hacker groups. But back in 2017, there was no pandemic, and the level of supply chain was, in terms of capacity, was in a much better position. It was able to absorb that shock and still continue. Today, given that supply chains are pushed to the brink and that they are struggling to keep up with the demand, what would be the impact of a cyber attack? It's dangerous to even think of. Boeing, the famous American aeroplane manufacturer, well, one of the companies that came out of the World War and showed the American manufacturing powers to the world, we all know the struggles they went through, and they found solace when it comes to freights. During the pandemic, they were converting the capacity of producing passenger planes into more freight carrying or cargo carrying planes, and while during the pandemic they have doubled up that capacity, now in 2022, as the supply chain tensions and the supply chain pressures are more, and there is no sign of the cargo prices easing up, they are increasing the production and the capacity of the freight related aircraft. Well, could it be that turnaround strategy that Boeing badly needed? Let's wait and see. Tax increasing, well, that is a conscious decision that many governments have to take, especially after years of giving special benefits during the pandemic, and Singapore is the country in focus here. After 2 years of the pandemic and giving multiple benefits to the citizens and businesses, Singapore is actually considering a fiscal policy of increasing taxes. But how will that be varied in order to support the migrant labor more and the expats more? Singapore is facing and staring at a massive labor shortage problem with migrant labor moving out, and also due to many lockdowns, people not being allowed to enter back into Singapore and so on and so forth. However, the real question is, will these taxations drive away people from Singapore or not? Well, only time would tell. News from the African continent, as always. There is a new 5 risky countries, or the big risk 5 countries that have been identified by some of the global bodies when it comes to Africa, and those are Ghana, Kenya, Ethiopia, Angola and Zambia. These countries, as they come out of the pandemic, are expected to be heavily laden with debt due to massive borrowings carried out during the times of the pandemic, and they are under serious pressure of paying back that debt and could even be facing certain problems of defaulting on their payments and not going ahead. What will be the impact on this on the entire region of Africa, which is showing growth potential, but what will the impact of some of these big countries, especially countries like Kenya, facing a situation of a possible non-payment of debt on time? The impact can be disastrous. And let's not forget some of the other developments in the region, such as Nigeria, one of the top oil producers. However, Nigeria is facing their own fears and demons when it comes to obtaining the required oil and supplying them, especially given some of the current challenges that they are facing as well. Not a very good time in terms of volatility for the African continent overall. On a final note from Asia, well, Thailand desperately wants the tourists back. Mind you, that pre-pandemic, they experienced around 40 million tourists for a year with about $60 billion of revenue and was about 20% of their GDP. But as the country opens up after the pandemic and as the tourists are somewhat returning, they're finding that some of the entertainment places, the shops, the restaurants, bars are all having one sign outside which says closed. It looks like the citizens or the vendors and the business entities are not quite yet ready to interact with these tourists. What will be the long-term impact of this, and especially with expectations that it will be around 2024 when the Thailand tourism industry returns to normalcy? That is not a very good sign for the government of Thailand. That's it for this week. No matter what business you may be in, stay safe and keep booming.